I've always been fascinated by the Bookseller, what they do, how many of them there are, what their offices might look like. Well, a trip with my camera answered all. Welcome, come to the Bookseller. This is our front entrance, little waiting area in case you're coming for meetings. Fun fact, this is the nibbies sofa. So if you want a nibby this year, this is where you were sat. So quite famous. Follow me, we're going to go upstairs to the first floor. And this is where it all happens. So the Bookseller's been going since 1858, so we've been printing our magazines since before we had digital printing. Ooh! And this is one of our really heavy old stencils from when we did lithographic printing. And we also have an old office plug as well. Ta-da! That one's not as heavy. So these are books open to colleagues. They have been put there by our books editors after reviewing them and receiving them in the post. We get some finished copies, and a lot of them are proof copies that come with a little description about the book and also the publicist's information. Please stay. That's great. So we have a little meeting room. As you can tell, it's become a film studio today, where we have a small table and screen, some old trophies and some coats, but we also keep old booksellers. So these have all been kept since we started in 1858. A lot of them are down in the basement because there's so many that they won't fit in here. The Bookseller has been running since its first issue was published in 1858. The Bookseller is a print and online business magazine for the book publishing industry, and it's one of the UK's longest standing magazines. The Bookseller would not exist without its team and their creativity, passion and dedication to providing the very best book content. I had a chat with a few of the members of the team to hear their stories and insight into the renowned magazine. My name's Polly, I work as the events executive here at the Bookseller. I work on our conferences and the British Book Awards. My day-to-day is really speaking with the people that make our events great. So that could be a stakeholder, like a sponsor, that could be a speaker that comes to our conferences, or that could be the publisher as well, the marketers and the publicists that enter the nibbies and get in touch with me and want to share their really good work. This is actually a new move. We moved here about 3 years ago, and just after I started. We used to be, I'd say, near Southwark. We moved here when we were bought by The Stage, which is a very similar magazine, but for the theatre industry. They're even a similar age. We've both been going since the 1850s. So as you can imagine, definitely not the first office move in our history. We've definitely moved a lot. But in my time, this is relatively new.
My name is Sharon Bailey. I'm a senior reporter at the Bookseller. I'm here 2 days a week, so I come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think definitely with something like the publishing industry where it's so reliant on those relationships. When you're still quite new, I never covered publishing before, being able to just know, oh, this person used to work here, this person's friends with this person, is actually very important, and you only really get that when you're in person.
I'm here twice a week, just like everyone else. We have really found that working with a lot of freelancers here and a lot of comment editors that we don't need to be in every day to get a magazine out, but we still really like having that collaboration in the office. You suddenly realise how quickly you get stuff done when you're in the office, but also when we have lots of editorial staff, you might need that quiet moment to go and read the book for your review or even write the review, so it's nice to have a mix. I would say we have about 30 in-house employees that are full-time, but we also work with about 10 to 20 freelancers, so that doesn't necessarily mean that they come into the office ever. They might just come in to pick up a couple of books that have been sent to them. I think it's a really nice mix. You get a sense that it's a small company when you see the office, but I like that it might be surprising to other people watching this that there's only that amount of staff. We do kind of have departments. We call them teams because the departments are in a sense so small. It might only be 3 people. So we have an editorial team that you can imagine is headed up by Philip Jones, our editor, and then we also have a sales team which is managed by Emma Lowe, our Director of Publisher Relations, and then we kind of have a production team, and that's the 3. If you're not in those teams, you might sort of be a mishmash, like me. I am technically Emma's colleague, but also I'm not a sales person. So it's a little bit of a mix, it's a bit of both.
My name is Mark Guest. I'm the head of central production at the Bookseller magazine. That basically means that I'm responsible for our print products, including the weekly magazine, the dailies that we produce at the book fairs, and the buyer's guides. I'm also responsible for the online content that we put up on the website, and I've been here for just over 20 years.
We're actually a surprisingly small news team. I think sometimes people think, oh, you're at the Bookseller, why haven't you done X, Y and Z? But there are only really 3 reporters, and we're trying our best. But also we're very happy to be invited to various nice events. We're a lovely bunch. We'd love to see you.
People think we are much bigger. I think people expect a huge office with a huge amount of magazines surrounding us and lots of highlighters and pens. It's not a very big office, and a lot of the people who work here do very broad roles. Another big misconception that we've been asked since we started is, do you sell books? No, we don't sell books. We get a lot of calls every year asking us where we can buy books. We use Nielsen BookScan, which is used by quite a lot of other people in the industry, and our charts editor is Kira O'Brien, who goes through and picks out the best.
I'm Kira O'Brien and I am the charts and data editor at the Bookseller. So I collate all the charts that we feature in the magazine. There's like 13 different print charts that we feature every week. There's also the Bookstat charts. There's our exclusive publisher supplied ebook charts, which has been running since 2016. We've also got Audible audio download charts. So I collate all the charts every week. Some of them are exclusive to the magazine, but many of them now go online as well, so they're all there. So on a week-to-week basis I'm doing that, but also various things like I do the children's conference speech every year, just telling everyone how children's book sales are once again soaring for another year. Touch wood. We do a lot of different focuses as well, like for example we've just had the Southwest focus, so we did a Southwest publishers chart and that was really interesting. It's a real hub for children's activities books, the Southwest. Who knew? There have been loads of trends come and go. The first year I was in the Bookseller, colouring books were huge, and I was just like, okay, so this is it now, colouring books will sell millions every year for the rest of time, and then that did not happen. Really recently TikTok has become absolutely huge, and that's been massive, and that really started across the 3rd lockdown in early 2021, and it's just exploded since. And like for example, Colleen Hoover's just gone to #1 with It Starts With Us selling 120,000 copies in its first week, which is just an eye-watering amount. It's like Osmond levels. So yeah, the TikTok boom just seems to be going from strength to strength. I keep waiting for it to start dipping and it's not, it's just carry on going. Romance has been huge, and it's really changed the romance category, because I think immediately before the pandemic it was kind of the 50 Shades of Grey era was kind of coming to an end, and it was sagas really big, and now everything's different. It's like the romantic comedy, very specifically a TikTok sort of genre, has really exploded. Of course, all the Colleen Hoovers have been absolutely massive. Sci-fi as well has really stepped up a gear, just because the hardback books are suddenly selling in such like massive amounts. They're having like these incredible first week sales, and so that has been absolutely huge as well. So sci-fi and romance are really being pushed. YA as well, but YA has been doing really well for the last couple of years. Really big YA books like They Both Die at the End has been huge. The Heartstopper books, obviously Netflix as well as up with that, but yeah, they have been massive. So YA is really booming after a bit of a rocky 2018 to 2019.
I mean, like any industry, there's a lot of jargon, so learning what sort of preempts and various things mean has been a bit of a ride. And just how sort of the book publishing process works, I feel like I'm still learning that every day, but I'm a bit more aware now. We all in the news team cover sort of particular publishers or areas, so I cover HarperCollins, for instance, all of HarperCollins, which if you're quite new to the industry, is massive. They have many imprints, so it takes a lot of my life. And I get sent press releases by the different teams within HarperCollins about their rights deals and stuff like that. So I'll spend 3/4 of my day probably writing up various releases on different publishers. I also cover retail and things like that. But also we'll be following leads at the same time and writing our own stuff. So they might come from sort of conversations or coffees we've had with people on issues of the day within the industry. So at the moment there's a lot on the supply chain, various things about the cost of books and things like that, the cost of living crisis, lots of things that I think general news items actually can really be applied to the publishing industry. So then that involves lots of like phone calls and interviewing people. So a typical day is mainly like being sent through lots of things, making that accessible and easy for people to read in terms of what news they need to know about, which deal has been acquired by which publisher, if a publisher's doing a certain interesting thing like raising a salary or something like that. But a lot of it is also just talking to our contacts, trying to find stories, and then bothering press officers to get answers to those stories, and bothering people to get interviews. The only thing within publishing that we maybe don't cover as much is self-publishing, just because we cover so much publishing that we don't really have time for it more than anything else, because there's so many people who are self-published. But even that kind of has exceptions, so so there's a certain amount of deciding what's newsiest. I mean, to be fair, if you're sent something by a major publisher like Penguin Random House, you're probably going to cover it, but that's by no means guaranteed. We'll have weeks where there are lots more rights and news coming in more than others, so a certain amount of editorial decision making is made on which ones, for instance, are exclusive to us, who's a celebrity deal that people are going to care about more. No, we can't cover everything. We try to do as much as possible because obviously we want to support the industry. I think a lot of people sometimes think that you review books or you can kind of choose which books we spotlight. That's a whole different area of the website, which is amazing, but in the news team we're very strictly kind of within news. I guess in terms of also features and interviews, although it does end up being a blurred line, and I can understand where people get confused because we often get pitched for, oh, would you be interested in doing an interview with this author or this agent or this publisher? And we probably would be, but that wouldn't be for me within the news team, that would be more for features. But then occasionally I will also do some featurey things to interview people because we are quite a small team. I think generally speaking, I do a lot of the reactive kind of very busy news and the much shorter pieces rather than those longer pieces, I guess, is the main misconception.
I mean, obviously, the very, very top, like, you know, most publishing houses aren't going to be able to come up with their own Richard Osman. But I think it's sort of, you can see when a surprise hit comes out of nowhere, you can see how quickly it filters down into, like, the genre. Like, even as something like, I mean, obviously, David Walliams has been massive for a while now, but, you know, the wave of celebrity fiction in, like, celebrity children's fiction in, like, 2015, 2016 was, like, crazy, and that's sort of starting to die out, and now it's there's a few sort of daytime TV presenters who are getting their cozy crime novels in, like Reverend Richard Coles, but you can just see like sort of the trickle down influence of like a massive hit, and I'm sure there's going to be loads of like Hoover imitators now. There's going to be so much sort of romantic thrillers like thundering into the chart.
The Bookseller is an independent magazine distributed both online and in print. During my visit to the Bookseller's offices in London, a special delivery arrived of the latest issue. I was able to see first-hand an unboxing of the parcel.
So every time someone advertises with us, like a half page, full page, they get a free magazine sent to them. If you are the cover, you get a box, a separate box. So we've actually got one over there. But yeah, it is very exciting to open. Straight from the printer, so this is this week's magazine, which is very cool. And then you can see on the back as well. I don't have to check anything because everything will have been already checked, because obviously once it's printed, like, there's nothing you can do, so there's no need to check. So yeah, so basically my job is to then mail them out. So I'm just going to hide the addresses here. Our publisher actually this week for the front cover, Simon & Schuster, it's the illustrator, so they've specifically requested that they want a copy sent to the illustrator separate to them. So yeah. Sort of distribution-wise is marketing side. I don't really have much to do with that apart from direct contact with our advertisers for the week. We do tend to keep a couple extra in the office for those who want it. Again, when we tend to have big issues, our menopause issue was really, really big. So sort of everybody took a copy home. But yeah, it did mean that sort of when actually people were messaging to be like, can we have a copy? The front cover, they emailed asking for more copies because they really loved it, and we were like, we have nothing left, we're really sorry. I think we managed to scrape together 2.
The most enjoyable side of my job is the events. That moment where you've worked for months really hard on one thing and then you see it in the flesh. And you see people reacting to what you have programmed, or you see people reacting to winning a nibby. That's always been a highlight. I guess that kind of links to the hardest days as well, because actually those are the hardest days too. Like you've got the pressure on you, you've got to deliver that event. So it's a nice mix actually. As long as you can handle the pressure, you're going to get a really nice kick out of doing an events job here. If you want to work in events, I would say you need to be ready to do absolutely anything they throw at you. That could be carrying loads of boxes around and you're not wearing your best outfit for it. It could be speaking to a stakeholder that you haven't met and you need to tell them about why your event is amazing. You need to be someone who is ready with a pen and paper when someone at your conference says, I've lost mine. You need to be ready to do absolutely everything and be excited to do that. In terms of skills, it's a tricky one. You're probably going to learn on the job. You know, I started as a volunteer here and I never left. So I've really honed my craft just through their events. So in terms of skills, just be yourself and be willing to learn. I wouldn't say you need a degree or anything in events management. I would say you just need to show that you are really willing.
I guess the biggest change that I've seen in that time has been what is going on online. Back then, online was almost non-existent, whereas now it's, you know, one of our primary kind of focuses. And so that would have to be, without a shadow of doubt, the biggest change that I've seen since I started at the Bookseller.
Anyone can write for the Bookseller. We have a comment section, which is both in magazine and online. And if we like what you've pitched, you'll be in our magazine. And it's paid, even better.
How does the Bookseller differ to somewhere like The Guardian, for example, that's a newspaper?
In ways we are very similar because we have the sort of comment pieces and the reviews, but I would say it's the real knowledge of this specific industry. The Guardian does print some great articles about it and will cover a lot of prizes too, but we know the best news, the best rights reports that publishers and booksellers want to hear. The other thing The Guardian doesn't do is a chart. We have the best chart news in the industry and people have relied on us since the 1850s to do that.
So the paywall tends to be on a story that we think will be sort of most interest to the trade, because obviously we want to keep things open to everyone that might appeal to everyone, or if it's about a specific sort of diversity issue, and so we want diverse people to read it, so you know it's not going to be stuck towards the publishing industry. But on things like financial accounts, they're quite specific and for the industry, and therefore we want the industry to kind of pay for it, and so that's with the subscriptions that most publishers or agencies will kind of have a subscription with the Bookseller. But also you'll notice various ads on the website and in the magazines and the events that we put on, so that's all part of our revenue stream.
I'm sure you remember there was that one about the salary that gained a lot of sort of backlash online. How do you personally or as a company deal with that sort of backlash when that happens?
Yeah, I mean it really varies on the story. I think there are certain things where, I think for instance on that story, you know, we're also having to be paid our own salaries, so there's a certain amount of getting that balance right of, you know, the work that we're producing has to be accounted for, and explaining that in sort of tweets and messages to people. But often sometimes decisions do get reversed if things are sort of, you know, that's a fair point, we should have listened to that. I think a lot of dealing with some of the stuff on social media is just like having those conversations, like what are people saying, why do we think they're saying that, talking about that within the office to decide on approach. It's not something I really deal with myself. I mean, you might get stuff on your sort of personal social media accounts, but in terms of the booksellers, generally sort of the social media teams and the higher up editors will have those kind of discussions.
I love a quirky hit. When something just completely out of the blue does really well, like there was a, I think it was this like puzzle, this book that's like a puzzle in itself it was republished after it became sort of viral during the pandemic, and that just kept bouncing in and out of the chart, like it was suddenly getting waves of like interest every couple of weeks. But I think a real niche like bestseller like that is so interesting. And it was also stuff like when just something like when colouring books were big, that was really like, what is happening? It's when you're right at the start of a trend and you're just starting to see it, and then obviously a year later you're sick of looking at it. Yeah, it's really interesting when that starts.
We have all these bound issues here, which I believe are also held at the British Library, and I think they hold those as a sort of record of our publishing output since that first day back in 1858. In terms of how these issues are used, I know the editor, for example, when he's doing his weekly comment column, he will frequently go back to those issues and look at, say, articles 10-15 years ago and refer back to them about, you know, maybe some of the predictions we made about how the book industry was developing and which sort of where it was heading in terms of its development. We also also get a lot of researchers who come in and use them if they're doing research on writing a particular book, particularly if it's about, a book about the book trade. So, and students as well, we sometimes get students in referring back to them, and people like to just look back through them as to get an idea of how the bookseller has developed over the years. So they're used for lots of different reasons, I guess.
I think probably the most challenging thing is just the absolute, the amount of data we have. I mean, Nielsen BookScan, it's been going since 1998, and the amount of numbers and the amount of book sales through there, it's you can do anything with it almost. But yeah, the sheer breadth of the information we have, it's incredible sometimes.
Doing as much as you can, internships and writing for different websites, pitching to people, but just going and put yourself out there as much as you can. But yeah, it's basically about networking and getting to know people.
With the magazine running since the 1850s, there have inevitably been changes over the years. We now live in a bookish world where new readers are found from BookTok. Physical books take the lead still over digital formats like ebook and audiobooks, and the pandemic has provided more event possibilities such as hybrid events. So, what is the future of the bookseller? How can we be certain? Will the book industry keep up with this fast-paced world that we live in?
There's going to be more great events. There's going to be top-notch customer service as usual. There's going to be an even bigger knowledge of the industry as we continue to grow. And I think there's going to be more fun. It's changing so rapidly. I really, really want to see the people that we have in our Bookseller 150 making important decisions about inclusivity and diversity. And also, as we go through a crisis in the energy prices and most likely a recession in the next few years, I want people to continue talking about salary and book job transparency. It's really important. I'm so proud of this industry for continuing to talk about it. I don't get that when I speak to a lot of my other friends in other industries,
Maybe I'm biased because I never used to sort of cover or work in publishing before, so maybe I am just noticing it more because now I work there. But I feel like publishing is spoken about so much more in the national media. Conversations I have with my friends about what books they're reading, I just felt like there was such a reading boom during the pandemic that has been sustained. People were really excited to hear what books you're reading, what books are coming up, and that there are finally more diverse stories being told, from voices that haven't been heard from before or maybe not enough of. So I do think the future's quite bright. I think there's a long way to go, but we're getting there, and it's very exciting to see that movement within the industry. I mean, everyone I talk to about various other issues, that's constantly a thing that comes up, and that's really refreshing to see.
It's interesting because I think 10 years ago everyone would have said ebooks would have totally taken over, and that hasn't happened, and people would have said independent bookshops would have died out, and that hasn't happened. So it is I think you'd be very brave to predict anything, because how is print still going? But there's some kind of connection between people reading and having a physical page. So yeah, I don't think you can really predict anything about the book industry, to be honest.